Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and get started here. It's 10 after, so we're going to go ahead and get rolling. First of all, as always, thank you guys for coming to CleveSec. We put a lot of effort to making sure that this happens, and it's great to make sure that we can actually get people here to experience the event live instead of just watching the videos later. It's a much different experience. Without you guys, this group wouldn't be possible. It'd just be a couple of us sitting in the room talking to ourselves. So we thank you guys for showing up. And I want you to remember that organizations like this are really necessary for our industry to stay strong. Without people learning, without people wanting to grow themselves, then we get stagnant and we start falling behind. That's something we can't afford to do. For those of you that have been here before, know we have some simple rules here at CleveSec. First, don't be a dick. Right? People are up here, they're trying to express their ideas. It's a little terrifying for some people to get up here and speak. And we're trying to foster a nice, safe community, strong community. So let's try and be respectful. At the same time, though, don't take yourself so seriously. No one is in here enforcing, strict code of conduct, and no one's wearing suit and tie. We're not bringing hammer down at anybody. So let's try and have a good time. And the last rule, the Fight Club rule, as we call it, is that tonight is your first time at CleveSec. You'll have to speak. So first, I just want to introduce you guys a little bit to where you can find CleveSec online. Our Twitter account is simply @CleveSec. We generally also retweet pretty much anything that comes through #CleveSec. So if there's something you want the community to know about, and maybe you don't have the audience you would like, go ahead and put it on #CleveSec, and we'll go ahead and see if we can get you a bigger audience for it. Also, it's great for if you need help on a project that you're working on, or you have some security questions, you have anything that you think the community can help you out with, go ahead and use #CleveSec for that. As most of you know, we have the Meetup site. This is where we coordinate everything out. We coordinate all the meetings, we coordinate the times. We have an RSVP on there to make sure we have enough food and everything for everybody, so make sure you're RSVPing on there. And you also, if you sign up and get an email account, get an account on Meetup and subscribe to CleveSec, you'll get email updates whenever we change anything, when new meetings are available, all that stuff. We have an obligatory LinkedIn group. There's not really any activity on it, but if you go ahead and search just CleveSec and LinkedIn, you'll find it to be the first result. But I'm not going to put the URL here because it's insane. Then we have the Gmail account. If you guys want to reach out to us a little more privately, if maybe you have a question you're not so comfortable putting on public, or you have some feedback or anything that you want to privately come in, you can send to the Gmail. You can also send in there if you decide you want to talk. If you have an idea for a talk at CleveSec, go ahead and shoot us an email there. It can be between 5 minutes or 2 hours, doesn't matter. If you have an idea you want everyone to hear, go ahead and shoot us an email and we'll work something out. And then last is the YouTube channel. This is where all of our meetings go afterwards. If you can't make it to a meeting within the week, the meeting will be uploaded to the YouTube channel and you can watch it there. Just remember that this is a community effort, right? Márion and I put in a lot of heavy lifting on the front end, but without you guys, this whole thing kind of falls apart. We have the 2 meetings a month, this meeting being our lecture and discussion meeting, and then at the end of the month we have our community night. This month is going to be a pub night at the Brew Kettle in Strongsville. Like I said before, make sure to submit your talk ideas. And spread the word, get people that are not necessarily involved in InfoSec, get them out to these meetings, get your sysadmins, get some developers out here, students, whoever you think would be able to benefit from any of this information, go ahead and get them out here. So, tonight's agenda. First, we'll have network segmentation by Mr. Garcia. He'll be talking about mitigating some common layer 2 and 3 attacks on your network. And then we'll have information insecurity by Márion. We're going to be exploring some of the inherent flaws in the internet and walking you guys through some tools and some vulnerable applications of how to exploit them. So with that, let's talk about first-timers. Raise your hand if you've never been to a CleveSec meeting before. All right, we got a lot. So it's very simple. We're just going to, all I want from you guys is to just come up. You don't even have to come up to the camera if you don't want. And just say your name. And just something about yourself. It doesn't have to be about security. We want to try and build a better community here rather than just LinkedIn connections. So just come up and say your name, please. So we'll go first. My name is Chris. I am one of the founders of CleveSec, and I bought a guitar a few months ago that I have no idea what I'm doing with.
Hi, I'm Danielle, and I do our play piano software engineer at a medical imaging company over in Beechwood, and computer security is just something I've always been interested in, never done anything professional in.
I'm Josh Gadka. I got my IT degree from Tri-State. I'm QA here at Highland, and I'm also kind of fostering an interest in security since I'm here.
Hi, I'm Josh Martin. I'm a mobile app developer here at Highland, and I work with Beer.
Hello, my name is Eileen Winsley, and I came with my husband, and I have no idea what's going on.
Hi, I'm Tom Cables. I'm a solution developer here, and I found an exploit in Radio Shack's rebate program a while ago, and they did nothing about it after I called them 100 times. So that was left open for about 5 years. Fun stuff.
You got a lot of rebates, is what you're saying.
Oh, yeah.
Next one's stuck.
All right, thank you, everybody. I know that's a little difficult, especially when you weren't expecting to have to do it. But now it's over, and next time you guys come, you get to go ahead and call out the people that are not raising their hands. You get to force them to come up here and do what you had to do. So that's all. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started with our first talk. Thanks, guys.
All right, so tonight we're going to talk about some network segmentation and more specifically in terms of security, how you can secure your network. So my name is Garcia, and prior to working here at Highland Software, I had 5 years of experience doing some hands-on network communication for the U.S. Air Force, and I've got an extensive network lab at home powered by Linux. So I'm going to assume you can all read here, and I'm just going to point out the bold here that network segmentation can improve security. Yes? Okay.
Are you ready?
That's fine.
Does anyone know how to use computers here?
Anybody computer? No?
No.
No, it's not syncing, so I'm on this slide here.
Push the scope. Scope has to be on the slide, yeah, on
It's there. It's there.
the slide. How about scope on the slide?
It's right.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Stand by. There we go.
Hey. Microsoft PowerPoint, everyone. All right. Okay. So yes, network segmentation can improve the security of your network. This is out of sync now.
Just in case.
Alright, so why should you bother with segmentation? Well, all kinds of devices are now connected via LAN and WAN. You've got phones, tablets, thermostats, refrigerators. So yes, we've got all kinds of devices, and many variants. We've got thermostats, phones, tablets, refrigerators. We've even got toilets. Even toilets. So here you can see the MyStatus Android application has a hard-coded Bluetooth pin of 4 zeros. As can be seen in the following line compiled from the application. As such, any person using the MyStatus application can control any status smart toilet, provided it's in pairing mode. Oh, but if it's not in pairing mode, you can sniff the Bluetooth traffic and pair with it anyway. You can read down the bottom, attackers can cause the unit to unexpectedly open and close the lid and do other things which cause discomfort and stress to the user. So, just one point of exploiting a device that's on your network and connected. Maybe a bit better of an example is the APC ups. You might be familiar with these at home. You may have a battery backup unit, and it has a network port. It's connected in, plugged into your computer. This here is quite a large list of exploits that can be done against the APC ups. And a lot of them are cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, so you have some pretty nasty stuff in there. You can see here at varying levels. A lot of them are in yellow, a couple are in the red, so kind of big deals. So, with this explosion of network-connected devices, the Internet of Things, as it's commonly called, the security of your infrastructure potentially put at risk by these devices being on here. You know, somebody can get into your device and mess with it, and then kind of get to other places here. So, then you also have the factor of third-party accounts created by maybe device vendors for remote support or testing or something like that. They can also cause potential holes in your network security, and nobody wants to be a target when it comes to this type of vulnerability. So, the payment card industry data security standard, for those who do not know, they kind of govern what happens with credit cards and accounts of financial nature that come across. In version 3, they added a clause here that says, without adequate network segmentation, the entire network is in scope of the PCI DSS assessment. They further state, to be considered out of scope for this assessment, a system component must be properly isolated, also known as segmentation, from the cardholder data environment, such that even if an out-of-scope system were to be compromised, it could not affect the security of the cardholder data environment. This is pretty powerful stuff there. They're trying to say that you've got to keep this stuff separated, as it says. So, if one machine is compromised, an infection or other security vulnerability can easily spread through the rest of the machines within a single segment. You got one segment, that's all machines. So, network segmentation can mitigate these security risks from becoming a widespread problem, or otherwise, even downtime type risks, hardware failure. So, only one segment gets affected at a time. So there's some clear advantages here of network segmentation. And one is that on a segmented network, you can have fewer hosts per subnet versus an unsegmented one. So you've got minimization of local traffic, so it kind of helps keep things in a smaller scope, if you will. Also, a single point of network failure can't take down the entire organization as easily, including security failures. So, not saying it's impossible, but it's less easy if you're split up. And we'll talk about that some more later. And broadcast can be contained to the local network or segment, and your internal network structure can be hidden from the outside world. Right? If you have segmentation, so people can't just pop into one thing and then see every other device in the entire network as easily. So, how do you prepare for segmentation? Well, it starts with a full understanding of your inbound and outbound connections. If you don't fully understand your network in regard to communication flow, your attempts at secure segmentation may fail due to oversight or misconceptions. The biggest advantage you have is knowing your network better than an attacker could know it. Right? So you gotta ask yourself questions too. Does this segment need to talk to this other segment here? Right? If so, does it need to accept all traffic from this segment or all ports? Does it maybe need two-way send-receive traffic, or could you get by with just a one-way? And involve others in the planning as necessary. You have other stakeholders, you got your network admins, you got your application specialists, so get all of them involved, ask the questions around. And you gotta plan out a logical grouping, right? That can make it easier to decide what exactly you need to segment, and whether that be devices, maybe users of a specific application, maybe a department, and there are tools you can use to do that. You can use Microsoft Visio, diagram. You can use a diagramming tool called DIA, it's DIA, looks like that. You've also got Network Notepad, popular Windows app for mapping your network and subnets and segments. Or you can even use, if you don't have access to a Windows machine or you want to use an online one, it's an HTML5, it's draw.io. It has a big suite for mapping out network. As you can see here, a lot of Cisco devices on here. You can tailor it to your network. So it's important too that when you make these diagrams, you note your boundaries of trust, right? So you've got to make specific denotations where you've got boundaries from segments or maybe from outside to inside or whatever the case may be. So to implement it, you first start by finding areas where you need to allow traffic flow between segments, right? So you can start by setting an always allow policy and establish kind of a baseline for your communication flow. Now it's important here that you don't misunderstand me. I'm not talking about always allow from the outside. So you're going to want to do this on like an internal segment or an internal switch so that you don't unnecessarily expose your network to the entire internet. So internal only and you're always allowed. So once you know it's open, then you can switch over to your restrictive or preventive rules, and that's where you only allow what you need through, and you continue to monitor your logs for exceptions to the established rules, and then adjust them as necessary. Maybe you need to, let a little bit more traffic through on certain ports of specific types for your network. And you don't want to forget to switch back to default deny when you're done here. It's critical to maintain proper security between each segment. By default denying these connections between inter-segments, you compartmentalize each of them and you limit the scope of potential compromise so that an attacker can't just easily jump between segments. And you want to base your traffic flow on necessity. Like I said, default to these denying of inter-segment connections and open holes only as needed. Keep everything else shut down. And with network segmentation, security is one of your primary goals here. Remember the first definition, So that means that all data coming to and from each segment should be controlled. It kind of requires a granular approach on traffic, maybe users, assets, different servers. It may seem tedious in the short term, but the long-term goal of a secure network more than makes up for the initial work. So there are a couple ways to segment your network. And I'll talk about the first way here is the physical way. So in a physical segmentation network, all nodes of a single segment are connected to the same physical switch, and this has an obvious downside. Physical connectivity can be very limiting if nodes need to move, right? Another downside is that each connected node, can communicate in the same broadcast domain, which generates extra traffic, and that allows every node in the network to examine all the packets to see every network frame coming through. So easy to sniff traffic, in other words, from an attacker's vantage. And you can, of course, use switches instead of the older way, the very older way of using hubs. Nobody here is using hubs anymore, right? Okay, good. That's good. So, that limits the broadcast domain so that, just the switch port and the NIC of the specific node. In most cases, there are still ways for attackers to get through that, and we'll address some of those later on here. And for added security, you can place firewalls between each segment so that again, you're talking about compartmentalization, everything going in or out gets filtered, gets traffic regulated. So the other way is to do the virtual way, virtual segmentation, also known as VLAN. You kind of group these ports, in maybe co-workers in the same department, or diverse user groups that maybe share the same network resources, applications, or software or something. Maybe devices that need to communicate with each other on the same segment, such as an application server and a database server, right? So you can group all these ports and users into work groups on a single switch or on connected switches using a VLAN. And by grouping them together, the ports and multiple switches, the VLANs can span maybe single building infrastructures, interconnected buildings, or even WANs. You can go global with this, big time. Because it helps you manage the security and compartmentalization more easily across the global enterprise when you can remove these physical boundaries. And there are two main methods of implementing this. You've got dynamic and static for a VLAN. So first here we're going to talk about dynamic VLANs. And that's typically based on a MAC address of a machine and uses maybe the protocol and some other identifying info, especially in the case of Cisco. And so that when a new device is plugged in, the switch checks against the VLAN management database to determine which VLAN that device or node or whatever it may be is placed on. So you've got kind of this automatic, VLAN setup here. So the benefits include you've got some less administrative effort involved in wiring costs. You don't have to rewire as many cable connections when a user's added or moved. And you've got kind of this centralized location. You remember I talked about the VLAN management database, which I'll picture in a moment here. You've got this kind of centralized location for configuration and logging of unrecognized systems that are added to your network. Kind of looks like this. So you can see here, you've got your new node on the upper left here. The VLAN is what? Well, it takes the MAC plus some other info, depending on the device. It feeds it in, it checks the MAC against the VLAN configuration server database, and it tells the node which VLAN to hop onto. There's some downsides, though, of course, to dynamic VLAN. There is a little bit more administrative effort required up front to set up your VLAN management database software. And then you've got the checking of the MAC address and protocol and other info, and that requires filtering on the switch level, on the layer 2 level. So the switch is going to have to use its CPU and RAM power to actually filter this out, so that can impact your switch's performance. And dynamic VLAN access ports not only join and leave the VLAN according to the client's traffic, but they also allow some broadcast packets to leak through the VLAN from other VLANs, even if you're on one. So it's not really optimal for security. And we'll go over that a little bit more in a moment here. When we talk about the other type of VLAN. So as opposed to the dynamic, you've got the static VLAN. So in a static VLAN, users are assigned VLAN membership by the port in which they're connected to on the switch. As the device enters the network, it automatically assumes the VLAN membership of that port to which it's attached. Right? So these ports maintain their VLAN configurations until the admin changes them. So the key here is that nobody else is changing them, and static VLANs work well in networks which moves are controlled and managed. Because the admin knows where users are going to move to, so they can swap the port there, have them plug into this one desk port, and that's now the proper VLAN. So these are a little more secure, as I was saying before, than the dynamic, because the ports don't age out. Does everyone understand the term age out? Kind of times out. Does anybody need further explanation on that? Great. So this actually prevents the forwarded packets from leaking into other VLAN domains on the network, because after a port's been assigned to a specific VLAN, then that port cannot send to or receive from any other device in any other VLAN. Now, there's an exception to that. You can use the router layer 3 device to assist in the movement of that traffic, but the switch ports aren't doing that themselves, right? So if a port becomes a member, and it's receiving this VLAN traffic on the port in a dynamic scenario, then at this point, that port remains an active member of the specific VLAN it attached to for, say, any amount of time is configurable, 20 minutes, right? So if the port doesn't receive traffic on that VLAN for 20 minutes, it's going to age out and it's no longer going to be a member of the VLAN. However, the problem there is that in a dynamic VLAN, in order to re-enable a host that has aged out, it's been silent for a while, in order to re-enable that host for sending and receiving packets, the dynamic ports are members of this layer 3, and they kind of leak packets between the VLANs. They leak like an eighth of the layer 3 broadcast traffic. So one could theoretically hop on if one of the aged out ports responds to a VLAN sync request again. Right, so it's important here that this is in dynamic VLANs only, that they kind of have this age out. The static ones are very hard set to whichever specific VLAN that they're on. But the thing is that unlike the dynamic VLAN configuration, an admin may need to configure static VLAN assignment on multiple devices as changes take place. There are solutions out there that you could get that help you manage it all, but in just kind of an out-of-the-box scenario, an admin may have to go into multiple switches across their global organization to actually reconfigure each port. So even still, VLANs are not without their security flaws. This is an example of what the static VLAN looks like. See the green color code there is the engineering ones. So they're all set there, and everything passes through here, even between countries, right? But every port is set to a specific VLAN and will not change if the admin does it. So there are some attacks, but there are also some defenses for these. So one is the ARP attack. So does anybody here need a definition of ARP? Anyone understand ARP pretty well? Okay, so I mean, it's the address resolution protocol, as you may know, and what that's designed for really from, when they designed it initially, it was for a friendly network environment, right? So you're talking, it associates the IP address of layer 3 on your router with the MAC address of your switch in layer 2. So it's doing this direct association, not really too much checking of security there. Just, I mean, an attacker could forge, let's say, an IP address layer 3 and a MAC address layer 2 and kind of hop on. And you wouldn't be able to verify that it was forged because if they use a legit combination, ARP's not going to tell you that. It's just going to kind of say, yeah, that's valid, let it on through. So this malicious user could identify themselves as a legitimate user and start to use resources that are normally available to actual users on the network. And it's even possible to transmit these ARP packets to a device in a different VLAN using forged details, because the router will help facilitate that. So there are some defenses available though. You can enable dynamic ARP inspection, DAI, and this is a security feature on Cisco equipment specifically. And what that does is it validates all the ARP packets in the network, and it discards the ARP packets that have an invalid IP and MAC address. You can check, with other vendors too. There may be others available. This is just the Cisco way of doing it. Then you have the MAC flooding attack. It's one of the more common attacks on a VLAN where the switch is flooded with packets of different MAC addresses, right? So what that does is, remember before I was saying how the dynamic switch scenario, it has this overhead it has to deal with. Well, when you flood it with MAC addresses, it's going to have to consume memory on that switch. So what happens is, during the MAC flood attack, the switch starts to act like a hub. And as I said before, remember that kind of broadcasts to everyone on the domain. So it starts to share the data with all of its ports, and thus all the nodes that are connected. So the attacker can kind of sniff traffic from there. So they can use any kind of packet sniffers to just grab that information as they're flooding the switch. The defense against that is to use a secure static MAC address. And these are manually configured on the switch. Most of these for the Cisco environment are not available out of the box. You need to add some additional configurations. You should always reconfigure your devices when they come out of the box. Add that security. And you can also limit the amount of MAC addresses that are capable of being received by the switch on ports, so that if you only expect a certain few to come through, limit it to those few. Don't allow the switch to be spammed to death with MAC addresses. Right? Another attack is the DHCP starvation attack. This is a dynamic host configuration protocol. For those who don't know, this enables your server to automatically assign IP addresses to host nodes, or maybe other info, the subnet mask, the gateway, information like that. And in this type of attack, the attacker sends numerous, they send numerous requests, DHCP requests, and they use a spoofed MAC address.
The cursor's on the screen.
It's not the screen.
It's on that screen.
Go to the right. Go to the right.
So anyway, this causes a denial of service against the DHCP server. So when this occurs, what the attacker could do is they could, kind of shut down the DHCP server so that legitimate users can't get addresses from that server anymore. They can no longer communicate with the regular DHCP server, which brings us into the next attack, DHCP spoofing. So this is sometimes used in conjunction with the starvation attack, where after they denial of service the original DHCP server, they set up a rogue DHCP server and they act as if they're a valid DHCP server, and they actually provide the end user with a legitimate, address configuration. But it's the wrong gateway, the wrong IP address, the wrong DNS server maybe. And at this point, the attacker can filter their traffic, through their setup. So easy sniffing. So they can route you through their servers and just sniff your traffic all day, because and if they send you to the original destination, you'll be none the wiser. So you can use a switch. Cisco switches have this capability to drop the malicious packets, and they use DHCP snooping. And again, that does take a little bit of overhead on the switch itself, but the security trade-off, I think, is more than worth it here in this scenario. And so how the Cisco switches do that is that they have a port configuration for each port in two states, right? Trusted and untrusted. So if a port's configured to be trusted, it can receive the DHCP responses. And if it's untrusted, it won't be allowed to receive DHCP responses, even so if a false attacker's DHCP response attempts to enter the untrusted port, the entire port would just be shut down and disabled straight up. So that can help prevent that attack. And then you have the multicast brute force attack. In this one, the attacker sends and then the switch receives this number of multicast frames in just rapid succession. So it's kind of the same sort of concept as other flooding mechanisms, where they flood the MAC addresses, where it causes the switch to kind of sort of turn into a hub in a way where all these frames are now going into other VLANs instead of containing them in the original one, because you've done out of service scenario. So you can set your switch up to ensure that you don't leak into other VLANs. You can use a static VLAN in this scenario so that if you were to try, it can't go there. It's not allowed, right? So then you contain them in the original VLAN which they were intended to be on. Then you have the VLAN hopping attack. So in the VLAN hopping attack, the attacker is going to send packets to a port which shouldn't be accessible normally. And they're able to spoof on this port with the help of what's called dynamic trunk protocol signaling. Again, this is another feature of a Cisco switch. And to defend against this, you can disable the dynamic trunk protocol on all untrusted ports so that you're not just listening for it everywhere. And note that all these defenses here are being done at the switch level, at layer 2, right? And while these methods are specific to Cisco switches, you can check with other vendors to see if they have maybe something similar to these. So I have a few security resources here for you. I'll make these slides available after the presentation here, so just kind of look over these. These are some good beginner guides to understanding network segmentation. So in summary here, you want to have a plan, right? You want to research the different ways that you can make segmentation work for your organization. It's not really a one-size-fits-all. I mean, maybe you have a reason, maybe you absolutely need to use dynamic VLANs or something, and maybe that works for you. Great if it does. You have other security mechanisms in place, or maybe if you know someone's stuck in the Stone Age that you buy with hubs, then all right, so be it. Wouldn't recommend it, but you can. So if you're using a VLAN, using a static VLAN can help to mitigate some of the common security pitfalls associated with dynamic VLAN. I mean, Cisco switches have all this built-in functionality to further enhance your VLAN security, so that would be an advisable route to go. I mean, if you were to go VLAN, if you can, go static, just because you want that dynamic, automatic stuff to deal with. And the sooner you implement segmentation here, the sooner you increase your network security and kind of gain control over those trust boundaries we talked about before. So does anyone have any questions?
Where's a good place to practice this stuff if you don't feel like paying for the virtual network simulator?
Good place to practice this would be VirtualBox. WorkMix VirtualBox is totally free. You can set up some VMs in there, and you can go into advanced configuration and kind of set up your network. I think Márion, your presentation next kind of shows a little bit of the VirtualBox environment if that's available.
Slightly.
Slightly, yeah. So
you can also for a firewall, you can use pfSense. They have, I think, a lot of the features that you talked about.
Yep. Also, if you're in a Linux environment, there's also IPCOP that kind of helps you kind of filter out traffic. You can also use raw IP tables. Just hand roll them. That's actually what I do in my network. I hand roll all IP tables in a script and have them go through. It's relatively safe if you configure it properly and block out all the proper things. Howard, your question?
Yeah, Chris, great presentation, thanks to you. Curious about, you mentioned your home network, kind of suggestions you have for home networking, things set up, things to do at home.
Well, like Márion mentioned, you can use pfSense. What's that? Oh yeah, the question was for a home setup, what could you do on your network at home to kind of enhance your security? So of course, by default, you're going to want to set up your firewall or router. You may even want to use a DDWRT, which is an open source Linux-based firmware you can load into your router. Most modern day routers can accept the DDWRT firmware, and it's really no more difficult than configuring the router as it is out of the box. Not too much more anyway, and it just gives you so much more flexibility in what you can filter out. So DDWRT is a good way to go, a really good way to go. If there's some interest, maybe you can talk about it in the CleveSec meetup forums. Let me know if you'd like to see maybe a more in-depth IP tables firewall configuration talk. We could talk about that, kind of dive a little bit deeper. This is just kind of a broad overview to get a feel for it.
What about using GNS3 to go through all this stuff?
GNS3?
Yeah, to implement all this, you can set up a router environment, switches and all that. I believe that runs all the Cisco firmware.
All right. Is that free or paid?
It's free. The firmware is unfortunately not.
Right.
There's places you search. Cisco firmware, got
legitimate backups that you can.
Yeah, or if you know
Obtain from
somebody
your-
who has like a Cisco admin, a lot of times they'll be able to download it.
Sure. So yeah, the suggestion was GNS3 for setting up a kind of a Cisco mock network virtually.
Yeah, it's all virtually defined.
Yeah, great.
An alternative to GNS3, which is not nearly as powerful, and it used at least to be available for everybody, is Cisco Packet Tracer. It only has Cisco switches and routers, and it's just an emulated environment, but it's a good quick start kind of thing.
Great. So another suggestion was Cisco Packet Tracer for those who can hear. Similar to GNS3, only does switches though, from what Márion says here.
Routers too, but just
switches and routers.
Yeah,
Okay, so kind of the basic devices,
yeah.
but good for still anything that you can use to simulate the traffic is all the better. Just get a feel for it. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for attending. You can find me on ETH0up. That's ETH0up on Twitter.
All right, guys, give it up one more time for Chris. Then we're going to go ahead and take a couple minutes break here. There's some soda left, probably a couple dozen pieces if you guys want to grab that while we go through the next presentation. Thanks.
While we're taking a break, in preparation for the exercise for the next presentation, you can grab your laptops and either use the live CDs that are available up here to just boot off of them, or boot VirtualBox and use one of the live CDs to boot a little virtual machine. If you don't have a CD drive, I can give you a link. Just come talk to me so you can start downloading the ISO to boot it up with VMware or VirtualBox or anything. All right.
So to recap, go ahead and take this CD aggregate and put it in your laptop. And go and load that up.
pretty excited for this. So, I will read this out loud because it's really important. The information you're about to learn can be and has been used to harm data, people, and organizations. Exploiting flaws in an application or network that you do not own and or have written permission and consent to test can be considered a criminal offense. Lengthy prison sentences and large fines are not uncommon punishments for computer-related crimes. Always make sure that any testing is done in a safe environment that you own, such as the CDs that you have, and we accept no responsibility for any legal issues that arise as a result of disseminating the following information. Please act responsibly. Very good. With that, let's get started. We're going to talk about why the web is kind of inherently insecure, and we'll have we have some concepts of how to be better at security and things like that. And at the end, we'll have a actual hands-on session, which can go on for quite a while. So stop if you want to go home, and we'll start with these three sort of domains of why it's got such a huge problem in security inherently. What exactly is the web, and what exactly are these flaws, and how you can sort of look for them. That was the last part, how you can look for them, and create proof of concepts to responsibly disclose them to vendors. Very good. So why is this a problem? Why is this important? And why should you care, specifically you? Then you know what it is, what are the possibilities, what can be done with this, and what you can do about it in your personal life, in your organization. And finally, how do attackers do it? How do bad people do it? How do we do it who are trying to defend organizations? And then some action time. So, here's why I believe the internet is inherently insecure. I am convinced it was made by gentlemen. They made the internet not expecting people to, misuse it like crazy, like the way it is misused today. And I have a little bit of an analogy here, so follow with me here. So the internet is the road, the functionality is the paint, and that's all there was in the beginning, and that's all that the gentleman created. And they weren't expecting adversaries to get the functionality that the internet had and misuse it in such a way as to construct things that are potentially malicious and that could create so much damage in different circumstances. And where does that leave you? You are the road runner. You're trying to avoid the coyote and all of the malicious intents that the coyote has, trying to keep always one step ahead of the attacker. That's the sort of blue team kind of goal, right? And I want you to keep this idea of functionality in the back of your head, because we're going to come back to it in a little bit. So, not surprisingly, but actually pretty surprisingly, there have been lots of breaches, not lately, but also dating way, way back. And I think the reason that these breaches shocked us so much is not the fact that they actually happened, is the fact that they had such a huge consequence and such huge repercussions in the economy. These breaches cost a ton of money in reputational damage, in you don't trust these companies anymore. So all of these are very dire consequences to all of these breaches. I don't think anyone was expecting this. As much as everyone might have expected that stuff like this was going to happen, I don't think we expected the sheer, weight of that these breaches have brought upon the information security industry, or just the information industry. And here are some numbers. These are numbers from 2013. I don't think 2014 numbers have been released yet, but the average organizational cost of a data breach in the US is over $5 million, just the average. And over 1/3 of all the data breaches are rooted in malicious or criminal intent. So So here's a zoom. US is there at the top. Other countries follow not very closely. I think the last two ones are Brazil and India. And look at that, they've got better cybersecurity than the US by far. Or they're not finding as many breaches. Could be that. And here I want to point out the distribution of what this is by the Ponemon Institute. Right, so you can see it's a pretty trustworthy source of information for at least what we can see. Right, sometimes breaches aren't even discovered or disclosed. But you can see over 1/3 is rooted in malicious intent, and you've got also system glitches and of course human factor. So, what does this have to do with you specifically? Well, you spend over 40 hours in these organizations a week. And it doesn't matter if you're a student, it doesn't matter if you work there, it doesn't matter if you're working with a different company. Sometimes you interface for a period of a few months with someone else, some partners, resellers, anything like that. You have, just by being an employee or a student, inherent access to data that should be restricted to you and no one else. And no one suffers from these breaches more than you, more than the users, more than the clients. And did you notice how many breaches happened due to human error in the previous section? That was over 1/3 as well, which is 2% below the malicious intent. So who is the most adequate defender for your organization? It's you. So thanks for being here, really. And that is roughly why the web is so insecure and why it matters to you. Now let's get into the few details of what exactly we're dealing with. So you have your computer, and in your computer you have your browser, and in your browser you type up an address and you send something that looks pretty much exactly like this to a server that hosts the page that you want to see. So that gets sent out, and the server returns something that looks kind of exactly like this. It varies. The bottom part there varies a lot, maybe the top part varies a little bit, but in essence, that's what it looks like. Your browser can read these special strings of text. This is HTML, but there's other stuff there too that could render different things in the browser. Long story short, your browser parses this and then loads up the web page for you to see. This is what the internet was supposed to be: static and very low functionality. Here we're talking about that functionality, remember? So this was the intent of the internet. Static content, just text and images, very low functionality, no such thing as logging in, as remembering cart information, account information, anything like that. Much less using, back-end databases. Nothing of that sort was ever intended in the original design of the HTTP protocol, of HTML, and so forth. So I will probably need the internet for this, I'm not sure. So if it doesn't work, I apologize, but I'm sure everyone will know what this is. Let me try it. Yeah, it didn't preload. Anyway, that was Neo getting his jolt of sudden education from the Matrix. And that is what happens today. You request one web page and you get all this stuff back. A lot of dynamic content, a lot of high functionality. Your web browser has to parse incredible amounts of information in very little time. That's why I had the video. All of this that you see on the left here, all of these websites were requested just by punching in CNN.com in my web browser. All of that popped up. There's so much stuff on CNN.com. All of ads, all of these, Facebook, other subdomains of CNN. All of this popped up just by hitting CNN.com. So really, the possibilities are endless. Really, really. with enough, not just malicious intent, but with enough even curiosity or time or resources, you could, depending on the web application, you could end up doing massive amounts of damage. There are over 60,000 CVEs to date, and I want to point out that this is just known and publicly disclosed things. CVEs, for those that might not know, are just vulnerabilities that are found and disclosed in different software all over. So Microsoft has a bunch of CVEs. All software vendors have CVEs, and that's how they tell you that something's up, and they tell you which patches specifically fix that specific issue. 60,000 of those, just known. More data was transmitted over the internet in 2010 alone than in all of the previous years of existence of the entire internet. Imagine today, we're 4 years into 2010, if that makes sense. Chris talked about the Internet of Things, smartphones, tablets. We all have a little computer in our pocket. This is a computer, it's not a phone. And baby monitors. There was a story 2012 or 2013 about some guy hacked into a baby monitor and was yelling obscenities at a kid that was just trying to sleep in their room. It's ridiculous. Why would you have a baby monitor open to the internet? So, people make these devices, these protocols, not expecting them to be misused because people are too gentlemanly, I don't know. So again, with enough time, creativity, and knowledge, motivation, there's plenty of low-hanging fruit out there to be exploited, and that could generally or potentially generate massive repercussions. And today we're going to talk about just a few of them, because obviously there are way too many for just a short session. So we'll focus on not all of the OWASP Top 10. OWASP is an open source project that the global information security community sort of takes care of. It stands for the Open Web Application Security Project. You can check it out at OWASP.org. I have a little link there. I'll give you a link to the presentation as well at the end. They haven't released the top 2014 vulnerabilities yet, but they do have that top 10 vulnerabilities list for you to check out if you haven't seen it yet. Today we're going to talk about these three. These will be actual part of the hands-on exercises. And then I want to quickly talk about security misconfiguration and sensitive data exposure. Security misconfiguration has to do with things like weak or default passwords, or old and unpatched software, things like that. So, make sure that it's educating people to use secure passwords is really a challenge. Mostly because it seems that we have asked too much of our users. We've asked them to create these large, complex passwords and have to renew them every so often, and people just end up decreasing their password security because of that, because they don't want to go through the hassle of doing that. So we have to make security the easiest thing to do, so by default they are secure. So, try to definitely not reuse passwords. Don't use the sort of conventional kind of password. Create a passphrase of something that reminds you of that system, of that account, so that's easy to remember. But most important is the length. Make a lengthy password, because then, it's inherently harder to crack. It will take longer and longer, exponentially, the longer it is. And actually, I attended DerbyCon a few weeks back. There was a talk where they were talking about, the guy was Steve Berman was a password researcher, and he was talking about passwords. And he said that if you're able to use one Unicode character in your password, and you will defeat every known way of password cracking, because they don't include Unicode characters, they just include their ASCII range. So keep that in mind, because this is an easy thing to fix. Security misconfiguration is not something that requires a lot of information security knowledge. It's just something that's kind of common sense. And sensitive data exposure has to do with leak or no encryption. And I'm not talking just about data transmission, but also files, data at rest, and things like open and free Wi-Fi's. There's an ad for breaking into open and free Wi-Fi's. There's an ad for spoofing open and free Wi-Fi's. So be mindful of those things when you have Starbucks or something like that. Those are open and free. That's exactly what it means. Anyone can see what's going on. So here are 5 things that everyone can do right from today. There's also a little acronym that will help you remember, but let's get started. 1, be aware. Always ask, is this safe? Is what I'm doing safe? Is this going to protect my data properly? It's as simple as that. Simplify it. Like I said, make it easy to be secure. The easiest thing is automatically the path that people will take. If it's also the most secure thing, problem solved. Plan B and Plan C and D need to. This has to do with what's commonly known as defense in depth. And the most important thing to get out of this is that all of your different security plans have to be independent. Plan B fails, Plan C has to hold up. If Plan C fails, Plan D has to hold up. Educate yourself and others. Again, thanks for being here. This is the first step in education. You can share these resources with other people. Like I said, I'll give you the link to the presentation. You can copy it, you can modify it, you can present it elsewhere. I don't care. And walk in the bad guy's shoes. This is what we're going to do here today after the presentation. Put on your black hat with permission. Today we have a safe environment to play with, and I'm giving you permission to do it. So these are the 5 things we can start doing from today on. Here's the witty acronym I came up with. Walk in the bad guy's shoes, educate yourself, be aware, Plan B, and simplify, and leave it on and off. So how is it actually done? How do the bad guys do it? They really have no boundaries. They can get plenty of information from open source repositories. Google indexes a ton of stuff. People unwittingly post things on forums, on Stack Overflow, things like that, that really shouldn't be posted, and then attackers can have access to that information, which is now public. So be mindful of what's out there from not only your company, but your personal life as well. The things that you post on Facebook or on a blog or on a forum sometime, they will stay there forever unless you have some sort of control to delete them. So, be a little bit paranoid. It pays off. Phishing and social engineering. This is probably the most effective way of getting through obstacles, especially if an environment is well hardened, if it has good network and application defenses. The best way is to fool someone who has access to grant you that access. Oh, social engineering. And physical infiltration is not out of the question. There are actual companies that do this as a business. They will get hired to go out into different places and try to purposefully break in and then tell people what holes they have in their physical security so that they can fix those gaps. And these are all things that are available for criminals to use. We have to be very aware of these. And that's the key point. As long as the rewards outweigh the risk or the effort, which nowadays it almost always does, because you can do things over the internet. No one's gonna, if you're good enough, no one's gonna track you. No one's gonna know who you are. Anything goes because there's very, very little risk. So how do we do it? How do the good guys do it to try to defend your organization, defend your personal information? There are a few things for software companies. There's the security development lifecycle. We've been trying to implement this here. Microsoft came up with it a few years ago. They've had an incredible amount of success with this. Windows 7 is vastly more secure than Windows XP, for example. There's external penetration testing. This is sort of similar to those companies that break into places. These external penetration testing is also breaking into places, but not physically, rather over a network, over application, trying to get certain exploits for certain systems, things like that. And what we'll do today is internal penetration testing. And the only difference is you know exactly what you have. You can look at the code, you can look at whatever you want, and it's a little bit more effective because you know exactly what you're doing. These penetration testing things, don't go out into the world doing that because it is illegal. Today we can do it here just fine. If you have questions or concerns about your Facebook account, your social media account, whatever, talk to the vendor first. Don't go out trying these things out because you will get in trouble. And here's roughly the methodology that penetration testing follows. We will skip some of these steps today because we don't need them. We don't need reconnaissance because we have all of the environment already preset. We don't need mapping really. Well, if you keep going with it after you leave today, you might use some mapping to discover what else is there. And mapping and discovery together. But then mostly what we'll be doing today is exploitation, just because I want to show you what exists and how you can sort of pinpoint it. Sometimes you actually come across these accidentally, because you mistype something and you break some form somewhere. It's pretty crazy. And for formal penetration tests, they'll give you a report at the end. We won't be writing reports today. So that's roughly what we'll be doing. It is now action time, so if you haven't booted up your VMs, please go ahead and do so. Or the CD is a live CD, you can just put it in your computer and use the BIOS to boot it up. I had another video here that I probably won't play. Everyone knows what it is too. It's just Neo and Morpheus fighting. Well, actually, I will need the internet now because I have to RDB.
Thank you very much. I love your presentations. That was sorry.
This is a sparring program, similar to the programmed reality of the Matrix. It has the same basic rules like gravity. What you must learn is that these rules are no different than the rules of a computer system.